Lots more, of course, on the BBC Sport website. Keep across the end of that snooker, which is getting very exciting. Can Kyron Wilson get over the line? From me and the rest of the team, that's all for now.
Hello. Well, your bank holiday Monday probably came with a rain interruption at some point. It was pretty unsettled. Some lengthy spells of rain across the southeast of England, but plenty of showers elsewhere. Others, though, managed some sunshine, and in Lincolnshire we had 11 hours of sun, so it wasn't so bad there, whereas others had the downpours. And across parts of northern England, had a couple of funnel clouds spotted, one over Saddleworth Moor and another one in the Derbyshire area. The weather is going to be improving, though, over the next few days as a ridge of high pressure starts to move its way in, and that will tend to settle the weather down. Slow process. We've still got a bit of rain left over across southeast England, one or two showers elsewhere, but these will tend to fizzle over the coming hours. And temperatures as we start off Tuesday morning, generally around 8 to 10. The coldest spots down to about 5 degrees. And that's probably where we'll have the best of the early morning sunshine. Now, where you do start off the day cloudy, and particularly around some of these North Sea coasts, it could be quite grey, some mist and fog patches around, a few spots of drizzle, but it is an improving picture for the majority. Cloud will thin and break up with sunny spells becoming widespread into the afternoon. Outside chance for a shower? Yeah, it's possible, perhaps across the hills of Wales and southwest England, one or two elsewhere, but not as many as we've seen over recent days. The vast majority of you will have a dry day and it will feel warm when the sunshine comes out. The high pressure continues to build in for Wednesday, but we do have weather fronts that will try to sneak in from the northwest. So Wednesday, again, it should be a fine day for the vast majority of the country. Certainly England, Wales, most of Northern Ireland looking dry with spells of warm sunshine, probably quite hazy sunshine. There will be some high cloud in the sky, but across the Hebrides, Highlands, Orkney and Shetland, it will turn cloudy, quite windy with outbreaks of rain moving in. In the sunshine, though, temperatures more widely climbing into the low 20s, so feeling progressively warmer. Thursday, you've still got a risk of a few showers this time for Scotland. Otherwise, some broken cloud and sunny spells. Should be another dry day for most areas of Northern Ireland, England and Wales. And again, those temperatures continue to climb. We're up to 19 in Belfast. The warmest weather probably across eastern England, where temperatures will reach around 22, possibly 23 degrees Celsius. That is going to feel warm in the sunshine. And there is more of that sunshine as we finish the week and head into the weekend, albeit probably with an increasing risk of seeing some showers moving in. That's today's weather. Bye-bye.
I used to work the whole day when I was pregnant. I wouldn't take much rest. I remember being thirsty all the time and out of breath.
Acabamos de llegar al lugar donde va a comenzar la búsqueda del migrante desaparecido.
So from where we're at right now, we can see from left to right and right to left, a heavily wooded area denotes the border between North and South Korea. There are no fences, there are no barriers, and there are no walls that separate North and South.
زنایی که فقط باید سکوت کنن، هیچ کس نباید صدایشان رو بشنوه، صدای گپشان رو بشنوه. ما تصمیم گرفتیم که در اونجا باید صدامون رو به شکل آهنگ بیرون کنیم.
Just because we've got a disability doesn't mean that we are children. We are adults with hopes and dreams. Without sports, none of us would be here.
Inspiring short films from the BBC. Watch now on iPlayer.
Plenty of piano on this series.
At 10, a possible breakthrough in the war in Gaza. Hamas accepts the terms of a proposed ceasefire. Palestinians are jubilant after months of fighting. Israel says it is willing to discuss the plans. Deal now, chant the Israeli families and friends of hostages, piling the pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu.
A short while ago, Israel's war cabinet voted unanimously to continue their military operation in Rafah. At the same time, they are sending a delegation to Cairo to thrash out a deal with Hamas.
Here, we'll bring you breaking news of a major data leak at the Ministry of Defence. Also tonight, John Swinney is the new leader of the SNP and set to become Scotland's First Minister. A judge in New York threatens Donald Trump with jail if he continues to defy a gag order in his hush money trial. And Boeing boldly prepares to go into space for its first crewed mission. Good evening to you. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he is willing to send a delegation to discuss the latest ceasefire proposals over the war in Gaza. Hamas leaders tonight said they accept the plans brokered by Egypt and Qatar, which is believed could involve the exchange of Palestinian prisoners for 33 Israeli hostages held since the October the 7th attacks. A ceasefire would be welcome respite for many tens of thousands of Palestinians sheltering in southern Gaza and would be the first pause in the 7-month war since a week-long truce back in November. But Israel has been making plans for a full-scale attack on the southern city of Rafah and tonight continued to bomb the area. Well, we'll have the very latest live from Jerusalem and America, and we'll be reporting on the continuing dire humanitarian situation on the ground in Gaza. But first, let's hear from Jeremy Bowen, who's here with me. Jeremy, Palestinians woke up this morning with a sense of dread, the usual sense of dread. Peace talks seem to have hit the buffers. Then all of a sudden in the last 3-4 hours, everything changed. What happened?
Well, there was that extra feature as well, of course, which was the Israelis telling them to get out of Rafah, the eastern side of it anyway, because of an impending military operation. I think what Hamas has done by accepting this rather unexpectedly is to upend all of Israel's expectations about the way that this would go. There was plenty of evidence that Mr. Netanyahu actually wanted to extend the war for his own political reasons. That's certainly the criticism made of him by many of his opponents inside Israel. But I think they were expecting that Hamas would almost take that decision for them by not going for a ceasefire. But what Hamas has now done is put the ball back into his court. In a sense, they've called his bluff. Now, the Israelis have said that Hamas are trying to vary the deal, but there's been the presence in all these talks today of the head of the CIA, William Burns, in Qatar, and he knows exactly what all the different versions of this are. So I think now we see Netanyahu under a lot of pressure. First of all, from his own right-wing allies, who've said, you've got to go in there, destroy Hamas in Rafah, no ceasefires. Got the hostage families saying, do the deal, get our people back. And Joe Biden as well, he might be the most crucial person in all of this. And Joe Biden wants to have a deal because in an election year, he's losing votes because of all this. So there are a lot of forces looming over Mr. Netanyahu and Hamas. And I think next couple of days, what we're going to have are more diplomatic negotiations and some tough decisions.
Sure. Fascinating. Okay, Jeremy, thank you. Our international editor there. Well, there were celebrations in Gaza as the news of the potential breakthrough reached Palestinians. Earlier in the day, Israel had ordered people sheltering in eastern Rafah, as Jeremy indicated, to evacuate ahead of what the Israeli military said would be a limited operation against Hamas. This evening, that offensive began. 100,000 refugees have been told to move to what Israel is calling an expanded humanitarian zone near Khan Yunis. But Gazans say the area is already overcrowded. Fergal Keane has more details.
They haven't had reason to dance for a long time, but they haven't forgotten how. Even amid uncertainty about Israel's position, hope springs. Across Gaza, BBC journalists captured the reaction of those convinced, perhaps prematurely, that a ceasefire will happen.
The feeling is indescribable. We're so happy we're going back to our home in Gaza City.
We're refugees from the north and we fled here, this young man says. We're so happy there's a ceasefire. Israelis are still absorbing the news. It came late on one of this society's most important days, when across the country sirens bring the nation to a halt in memory of the dead of the Holocaust. A day of reflection in a country traumatized by the Hamas attack last October. Tonight on the streets of Tel Aviv, those who believe healing that trauma can begin with a ceasefire deal and the release of Israel's hostages.
We expect from the Israeli government to take this deal to save all the remaining hostages who are still alive.
But after 7 months of a war in which Israel's army pledged to destroy Hamas, a ceasefire deal that fails to accomplish that risks breaking Israel's wartime coalition government. Israel will send negotiators to talks but won't stop fighting yet.
We examine every proposal very seriously, and we review every possibility on the issue of negotiations and the return of the hostages to their homes as quickly as possible and as a central task. At the same time, we carry on with our operations in the Gaza Strip and will continue to do so.
This morning, the people of eastern Rafah woke to leaflets telling them to evacuate. Many have been displaced before, but still they were told to leave. Everyone, no matter how old, how young, or how vulnerable.
ومعنا صغارنا واطفالنا ومرتي وامي والعيله وكلنا والله ما احنا عارفين نروح مش عارفين وين نروح.
To Al-Mawasi, Israel says, and other desolate places beyond Rafah. The so-called humanitarian zones were to be expanded, but they've never been safe from sickness, hunger, or war. This is the aftermath of raids on Rafah last night. People hope these may have been some of the last airstrikes if the ceasefire can be made to work. News of the Hamas announcement was still hours away. Nisreen Raja, mother and refugee. For 7 months, this has been the daily reality. Hani Ashtar, an orphan, grieved by his relative Reem. His family was killed during the war, she says. Even he was killed. So many here are grieving and exhausted. Late tonight, Israel attacked eastern Rafah, where they told people to leave. Celebration had turned to fear, and the hope that tomorrow might bring peace. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Let's get the very latest now from Frank Gardner, who's live in Jerusalem, and Gary O'Donoghue, who's in New York. Frank, first to you. As we speak, Israel still hasn't signed on to this deal.
No, they haven't, but they have at least agreed to do what they didn't do at the weekend, which is to send a delegation of mediators, experts in their view, to try and thrash out a deal. They've said that the terms that Hamas have agreed to are very far from what meets their needs, but they're not ruling it out. So I think there is a degree of optimism here. But at the same time, as I mentioned, they are continuing their push, their military push, against the wishes of the Americans in Rafah. And that is controversial because all the aid agencies are saying this could be a catastrophic result for the civilians there. And essentially, I think if you had to sum up the Israeli position, it would be keep talking, but keep fighting.
All right, Frank, thank you. To you, Gary, at the White House. Joe Biden, his team, they're very anxious over Israel's planned attack on Rafah. They don't want it to go ahead, but Israel, it's clear tonight, is still planning to push on.
Yeah, the administration here believing we're at a really critical stage in this whole process. They are saying that they're looking at the details of the deal that Hamas have said they'll accept, talking to their partners in the region, And also, of course, the CII director, Bill Burns, is shuttling between Qatar and Cairo, trying to work out what to do next. Now, they're saying that they're going to look at that in great detail. One thing they're being very clear on is the question of Rafah. They say they've seen no credible plan of how to protect humanitarian needs in Rafah if there were any kind of incursion there. They've been opposed to that all along. And I think one thing today from the National Security Council spokesman, Clive John Kirby, sums it out. He said, "I don't think there has been a more sensitive stage than right now."
All right, Gary, thank you for that. Gary O'Donoghue there, live in New York, and Frank Gardner in Jerusalem. Now to that breaking story back here tonight and the news of a significant data breach involving the Ministry of Defence. Alex Forsyth is here with me. Just take us through it.
Well, Clive, what we know so far is that there's been an unauthorised access of a payroll system, effectively a hack. Now, this system's run by an external company, so this is not the Ministry of Defence's main computer. Therefore, it does not involve any operational data. What it does involve are mostly names and bank account details of current serving military personnel in the RAF, in the Royal Navy and in the Army, and also some former military personnel. I'm told this dates back a few recent years. In a very, very small number of cases only, it involves some addresses as well. Now, at this stage, it's not clear what this information's been accessed for, but it's clearly a significant data breach. The MOD have taken action. They've taken this system offline and investigations are underway. They're also in the process of notifying those involved, offering them assurance, offering them assistance, and also getting in touch with some veterans groups for those past military personnel. And I understand MPs may be updated on this tomorrow. It's clearly a developing situation.
Indeed. OK, Alex, thank you. Alex Forsyth there. Now, John Swinney was the only candidate for the role of Scottish National Party leader, and now he's been elected to the top job. He's set to become Scotland's new First Minister, as James Cook explains.
I'm delighted to confirm that our new party leader is John Swinney.
In the end, it was the coronation of King John. No other candidates, no contest, but straight to work as SNP leader.
My focus will be the economy, jobs, the cost of living. It will be the National Health Service, our schools and our public services. It will be addressing the climate crisis.
When John Swinney first led his party, he was in his 30s.
Hello there, John Swinney.
In opposition, he struggled to break through, despite an occasional sprinkling of stardust. But in the cabinets of Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon, he rebuilt his reputation, charming in private, tribal in public. Do you take some responsibility, personally, for the polarisation of politics which you have described?
I've obviously contributed to that, James. Yes, of course I have. And I look at politics today, and I think politics is in the worst state I've ever seen it in my lengthy involvement in politics. So I'm here to do something about that.
The first step of his plan is to persuade MSPs to elect him as First Minister.
John Swinney has been the heart of the SNP leadership for the last 40 years. He's been at the heart of this government for the last 17 years. And this is just more of the same kind of approach when our country needs change.
John Swinney's own campaign slogan was Uniting for Independence. I think the focus has to be on improving our public services, on growing our economy, on creating more jobs here in Scotland.
The Scottish National Party needs to be brought back together.
It's been a tough year for the SNP, with rows about gender, climate and economic policy. So is the party now changing direction? John Swinney says he'll write a new chapter in his party's history. But with polls suggesting the Labour Party are resurgent, he might need to get started on that story sooner rather than later. James Cook, BBC News, Glasgow.
Rishi Sunak insists the result of the upcoming general election isn't a foregone conclusion and that he'll fight hard for what he believes in. He's been speaking for the first time since the full extent of Tory losses in the local elections became clear over the weekend. Here's Nick Eardley.
Mate, you hungry?
What is Rishi Sunak offering his pessimistic party? The Conservatives took a thumping at the local elections, and with a general election looming, the picture for him is pretty bleak. but he's not backing down.
Whilst, of course, this was a disappointing weekend for us, the result of the next general election isn't a foregone conclusion, and indeed actually is closer than, or the situation is closer than many people are saying. I'm absolutely determined to fight incredibly hard for what I believe.
But it's an argument that's getting harder to make. I've spent the afternoon on the phone to Conservative MPs before they return here tomorrow, and although they won't do interviews, the conversations are interesting because they paint an incredibly gloomy picture. One MP talked about the next few months being managed decline. Some talk about 200 seats being a good result for the Conservatives at the general election. And even among optimists, the talk is about limiting losses rather than necessarily winning the election. It does, though, seem that the Prime Minister's position is safe. Rebels talk about influencing policy, maybe forcing a cabinet reshuffle. And that in itself is interesting because it feels that even Rishi Sunak's biggest critics have given up on removing him. Wins like here in Rushmore have given Labour extra confidence that they could be heading for power. Is there a view in the Labour Party that the local election results suggest that it's in the bag for you?
We're really encouraged by the local election results. They show us winning in all the places that we would need to win a majority, but we'll never be complacent or take the outcome of the general election for granted.
Rishi Sunak seems safe for now, but finding a recipe for electoral success is proving difficult. Nick Earley, BBC News.
The judge presiding over Donald Trump's hush money trial has threatened the former president with jail if he continues to violate a gag order. He's pleaded not guilty to criminal charges of falsifying business records to cover up payments to a porn star. Neda Tawfiq is live in New York. Neda, Mr. Trump is getting on thin ice. He's in danger of going to prison.
Yeah, Clive, this is the 10th time that Donald Trump has been found in contempt of court, this time for comments he made about jurors that are unsubstantiated, and the judge saying it's a direct attack on the rule of law. But nevertheless, the judge says he's doing everything he can to avoid sending Donald Trump to prison, but he will do so if necessary, he says. And that would be an unprecedented move in an already unprecedented trial. The judge noting the implications on the presidential election, on security challenges, given this is a former president who has a Secret Service detail. Donald Trump, leaving court, though, said he thought the day went very well and going to jail would be a sacrifice he was willing to make. But Clive, after that ruling from the judge, we got back to the matter at hand. We heard from two Trump Organization employees, one a former one, the longtime controller, Jeff McConney. He said that Michael Cohen was reimbursed $130,000. Donald Trump's team says that was for legitimate legal expenses. McConney says he never saw a legal retainer from Michael Cohen. So the question is that evidence enough to paint Donald Trump as the architect of falsifying business records? Well, jurors will have to hear from other witnesses, including Michael Cohen himself.
OK, Neda, thank you for that. Neda Tawfiq there live in New York. Fans have lined the streets of Ipswich, cheering on the town's footballers during a parade celebrating their promotion to the Premier League. It's been more than 2 decades since they played in football's top flight. They secured promotion on Saturday with a 2-0 win over Huddersfield. Now this is the Starliner, a brand new spacecraft that in the early hours of tomorrow will make its first crewed test flight. 2 NASA astronauts will be heading to the International Space Station, as Palab Ghosh explains.
Ready for launch. Right on top is Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. It's the latest private sector launch to the International Space Station. This is Starliner's first test flight with a crew. It's 5 metres high and 4.5 metres wide. It can carry up to 7 astronauts into low Earth orbit, but this time it'll be carrying just 2. During the mission, the crew will test the spacesuits and seats, assess the onboard life support and navigation systems, and evaluate the system that moves cargo to the International Space Station. If all goes to plan, Starliner will be certified for regular supply missions.
And liftoff.
Its first uncrewed test flight in 2019 didn't make it to the space station because of a software fault. A second attempt in 2022 did make it, but there were issues with some of the thrusters and the craft's cooling system. And on Earth, Boeing has been facing growing scrutiny because of faults with some of its aircraft.
This is the big one. This is the first test flight with humans on board. They've had a few problems on earlier test flights, I think it's fair to say. So there's a lot riding on this one.
The astronauts, in their new blue lightweight suits, have reassured those close to them that the faults have been fixed and the spacecraft is safe to fly.
We're here because we're all ready. And our families and friends have heard about it along the way. We've talked about all the issues that we've encountered. And I think they're happy and proud that we've been part of the process to fix it all.
The astronauts will dock 24 hours after liftoff and return after 10 days. They'll experience Starliner's landing system, which will touch down on land in the deserts of the southwestern United States. Palab Ghosh, BBC News.
Let's hope they have good weather for it. And what's the weather going to be like here, Chris Fawkes?
Well, chances are, Clive, if you've been out and about today, your bank holiday may have been interrupted by some rain. It's been pretty unsettled. Look at this beauty. This is a big thundercloud into Devon. There are actually 2 thunderstorms at the moment. One is there in Devon, another one's working across the southwest Midlands. So we're still yet to see the back of today's showers. Still a weak weather front continues to bring rain in across parts of southeast England as well. We've had 30 millimetres from that in parts of Surrey. Now, high pressure is eventually going to build in from the west over the next few days, and that is going to tend to settle the weather down, which is good news. The last of the day's showers slowly easing away, the rain pulling away from southeast England overnight, so gradually it does become a bit drier. Temperatures around 8 to 10 degrees, but 1 or 2 spots in the countryside could get down to 5, where we keep the longest of the clear breaks. Tomorrow, a lot of clouds to start the day. East Scotland, eastern areas of England, around the North Sea coast, some mist and fog, bit of drizzle as well. Otherwise, the cloud will tend to thin and break as we go through the day. OK, there could be 1 or 2 showers. Hills of Wales, hills of southwest England are probably the most likely spots, but nowhere near as many as we've seen over recent days. There's going to be a lot more in the way of dry weather, and with more sunshine coming through, it will start to feel warmer. Now, that high pressure continues to build in for Wednesday, but it's not strong enough to keep these Atlantic fronts at base. So it is across the northwest of Scotland, where we'll see some rain getting into the Hebrides, Highlands, Orkney and Shetland, with strengthening winds. Away from that feature, for most of the day, Northern Ireland, England, Wales, southern and eastern parts of Scotland, dry with hazy spells of sunshine. It's getting warmer. We're up to 20 in Newcastle, 21, 22 the top temperature across East Anglia and southeast England. And to be honest, we've got more of the same really through the rest of this week. More of us will enjoy some of that warm weather, and in the May sunshine, it's going to start to feel warm. That's the latest, Clive.
Shorts and not a brolly. It's about time. All right, Chris, thank you. Chris Fawkes there. That's it. Now let's join our colleagues for the news where you are. Have a very good night.
Good evening, I'm Megan Owen. The boss of Eurotunnel has insisted there will not be long queues of cars at its terminals when a new EU travel system starts in October. Brits heading to and from Europe will need to register fingerprints and a photo at the border, which has prompted warnings of delays. Well, today marks 30 years since the opening of the Channel Tunnel, a mammoth engineering project which connected England with France, and it remains the world's longest undersea tunnel. Well, here's our transport correspondent, Katie Austin.
A moment in history. 30 years ago today, Queen Elizabeth and French President Mitterrand officially opened the new connection between their 2 countries, which made an idea dreamed up centuries earlier a reality. Since the Queen made her journey through the Channel Tunnel, 480 million passengers have done the same. These days, 400 trains speed through it each day.
We're now going at about 120 kilometres per hour, which is roughly 75 miles per hour, and we're coming up to the middle of what is still the world's longest undersea tunnel.
Driver Martin has been here since the beginning.
People have this concept that it's just straight through to France, and it's totally not. The tunnel itself is up, down, round the corners and everything. It's no straight lines at all.
So you sort of know this tunnel like the back of your hand?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's like a second home, really.
Building it was an exceptional feat of engineering.
There are actually 3 tunnels. The one I'm standing in right now with my high vis and my hard hat isn't for trains. It's used for ventilation, access for maintenance and evacuating people in an emergency. We're now on the France side and the UK is 32 miles that way.
The tunnel carries a quarter of trade between the UK and the EU. plus plenty of holidaymakers, whether on the Eurostar to Paris and beyond or using the car shuttle to reach somewhere like Le Touquet, an hour's drive from Eurotunnel's Calais terminal.
Drove down to Folkestone, jumped on the tunnel, half an hour, Calais, 40 minutes down the coast. Perfect, nice and easy, no problems at all.
Have you done that before?
Yep, we've been to Le Touquet sort of 3 times, so we've always come through the tunnel.
Tunnel tourists help keep the wheels moving for small businesses, including this one.
I drive the little train. Lots of English people come at the weekend, in cars, in the shuttle. It's very good.
Plenty of Brits swing by the town's golf course.
Every year we've got 45,000 visitors, and basically 20,000 of those visitors are English people.
Charles thinks the shorter journey compared to ferries means a longer holiday.
Which is an extra round of golf, so that's more fun for them and more business for us.
The tunnel's financial journey hasn't always been smooth. It opened £2 billion over budget. At one point, the company which runs it nearly went bust. Predicted passenger numbers were never reached, but Eurotunnel became profitable. More recently, new challenges. The pandemic, and Brexit meant putting millions into new systems to deal with additional customs rules. What's next? Well, the boss here wants more trains running. That could include, for the first time, rivals to Eurostar running passenger services.
Already, new companies have said that they want to launch new services within the 5 next years in the tunnel. We are very confident that within the 10 next years, there will be a doubling of the direct connection between London and Europe.
Before then, change is on the way for people crossing the Channel. Eurotunnel is building an area to cope with the EU's new border system starting this October. We were the first to film the machine that passengers will use at Calais and Folkestone to register fingerprints and a photo instead of having their passport stamped.
The crossing time will be extended by 5 to maximum 7 minutes for each customers. And as we have extended the number of lanes, there will be no delay on the highway, nothing.
The cost of all this, £70 million. The tunnel's 30-year history has already proved eventful, and it's far from the end of the story. Katie Austin, BBC News.
The final of this year's Eurovision Song Contest is coming up next weekend, but contestants have already been putting on the style for the event's official opening in Malmö. As many as 100,000 visitors are set to descend on the Swedish city for the world's largest live music contest. Poppy Jeffrey reports.
In Eurovision, you don't get a red carpet, you get a turquoise one.
See that girl, what's that scene, singing the dancing queen.
This year's contest has been officially opened in the Swedish city of Malmö, ahead of what is a very busy week for the 37 representatives taking part. From the refined to the quirky.
Hello, my name is Windows 95 man.
Tomorrow is the first semi-final, with half of the acts performing in the hopes of making it to the grand final on Saturday. The UK is part of the Big Five, the countries that contribute the most to the EBU, and they automatically get a place in the final. But for the first time, they will perform live in the semis. And it's fair to say that Ollie Alexander isn't doing things by halves. But this year's contest has an undertone of tension, with calls for some acts, including the UK, to boycott the event over the Israel-Gaza war.
I think it's really important that people are able to protest and people voice their opinions. Also myself, I think it's really important to not stay silent, and that's why I also collaborated with several artists this year to write a written letter, which is still on my Instagram.
Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride.
Israel is competing. Eden Golan's song Hurricane is a rewritten version of her first entry, October Rain, which was thought to reference the Hamas attacks of October the 7th. The tension means security is a real focus. but police in Malmö say they are ready.
We have a high security around the Israeli delegation, but we also have a high security for the other delegations and from the other countries. So I think it's important for us that all of them feel safe when they're coming to Malmö. So even if they're not from Israel, we try to keep them in a good mood and feel safe no matter what country they're from.
And they are definitely in a good mood. The permanent slogan of Eurovision is United by Music, something that's not lost on those taking part.
There should be demonstrations, people should voice their opinions, people should boycott. But for ours, in our sense, for us it means it boils down to those 3 minutes of music. Really, that's a completely non-intellectual experience. And when you don't think anymore, you just experience, you don't judge, you don't divide, that stuff goes away. And we need to foster those moments where we experience that together.
And with that, the Eurovision Song Contest 2024 is good to go. Poppy Jeffrey, BBC News.
The time is 10:31. Coming up at the top of the hour is Newsday with my colleague Steve Lai. But first, here's Hard Talk.
Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sacker. All of us are heavily influenced by the social, cultural and economic environment in which we are raised. As ideas, trends and technologies change, so too do generational traits. And right now, there is intense focus on what is happening to generations of young people closer in age to my kids than to me. Are young adults inclined to be open-minded or closed? Are children's minds being rewired by the ubiquitous smartphone? Well, my guest is the renowned social psychologist Jonathan Haidt. Are we losing sight of what freedom and curiosity really mean? Jonathan Haidt, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you so much, Steve.
It is a pleasure to have you here. Now, of course, your home base is New York University across the pond in the United States. Right now, that university, along with many others in the US, is in ferment, with students occupying certain grounds within the university. You've written a lot over many years about the intellectual